Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we are going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election and taking a look at a potential Ron DeSantis versus Kamala Harris matchup. So, I did one of these not a month ago, that's too recent, but a couple months ago, maybe like December or January, and we're going to be revisiting this and seeing Kamala Harris, Ron DeSantis, who I think would win each and every state. So I don't want this video to run long. I tried, my goal is to have every video kind of for the most part be under 20 minutes long, and I could, and I've seen videos where like I've rambled on about this for half an hour. So we're just gonna get started and do our safe Harris states. I don't really need to explain any of these. Colorado is debatable, but I just think that Biden won it by 13. It's just too far gone for the GOP. I don't think they can win or come close to winning it anymore. So 186 safe electoral votes for Kamala Harris. Oh, Hawaii too. So I think that's it for the safe Harris states. Unless I'm missing something. No, I don't think I am. So that's it for Harris. For Ron DeSantis, I think he'd win Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, except for the 2nd district. We'll talk about that in a second. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all safe. So 106 safe electoral votes for Governor Ron DeSantis, 190 for Vice President Harris. And now we're going to get into the likely states. So I think the first likely state for Kamala Harris would be the state of New Mexico. This is a state that I usually pin down to likely D. I mean, in a red wave year, this could be under a 5-point margin of victory for the Democrat, but it's still a state that the Democratic Party should be winning regardless of what the national environment looks like. Now, that margin could be narrowed up. In 2020, they actually had a fairly close Senate race. It was only D+6. It was closer than most people expected. So Kamala Harris, she might. I don't think she's a poor or great candidate for the Hispanic vote for a Democrat. So I think that she'd probably carry New Mexico by a standard, 10-point margin for a Democrat. I also think that she would win Minnesota by a likely margin. I think I had it as like I mentioned, I made another DeSantis Harris video. I think I had it as lean, but I think, the suburbs of Minneapolis and the city itself, they're just too blue that no matter how well DeSantis does in the rest of the state, it doesn't matter because he'll still lose it. Now, the margin could change, if DeSantis has a stellar performance in the rest of the state, he could make it really close, but, I don't see that happening. I don't think that DeSantis can do really too much better than Trump with these working class voters, especially in the Iron Range. Now, it's kind of a trade-off because I think that for the working class, Trump was a little better of a candidate, but I think he ran against a better candidate, Biden. And I think Harris, as of right now, again, this could change, but as of right now, she's not a great candidate for the working class. So Minnesota, I think, would kind of stay maybe a 6-point Democratic state for the time being. But again, we're still 3.5 years away. Nothing to say is definite, and it's probably not going to be the actual election. So now let's take a look at the state of Virginia really quickly. The suburbs of the Nova suburbs, Northern Virginia, and when I say the Nova suburbs, I mostly mean the suburbs of Washington, D.C. They are trending to the left, and it is insane how far to the left these areas have trended. These were solid red 15 years ago, and now they are really, really blue. So I think that Virginia, no matter what DeSantis does, because I think he'll improve over Trump in the suburbs. I think that no matter what he does, will still lose Virginia. I think it'll be under 12. If this were a Trump-Biden matchup, I think this could be a safety state. But I think that since Harris is weaker than Biden in 2024 as of right now, I put it as a 10 or 11-point Harris state. Maine as well, but I don't think we should talk about that too much. This is just a state that not really competitive, but it does narrow up to being under a 12-point Democratic win. So DeSantis in Alaska, I think Alaska is going to be really interesting to watch over the next decade, but it's still not going to be too competitive in 2024, barring something really wacky happening. So for that reason, I think that Alaska is going to be, somewhere in between 7 to 10-point GOP victory in 2024. Then going over to the state of Kansas. Kansas, I was debating putting in safe, but, the suburbs of, because Kansas, the geography there for Democrats is actually okay because, first of all, Wichita is ridiculously red right now for a big city. It's a city of, I think 500,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. Democrats are improving in Wichita. They're also improving in the Kansas City suburbs, kind of areas in between Kansas City, Overland Park, Topeka. They're improving in those areas, and that's helping them narrow Kansas up, but it's still not going to be enough to flip it anytime soon. But the point is, if DeSantis does well enough in the Kansas City suburbs, he can make it a safe red state again. But I just don't see him doing, extremely well there. I don't think he'll do poorly, but I just don't think he'll do well enough. to kind of make Kansas revert back to safe red for one election cycle. So I think this is going to be an 11 to 12 point DeSantis state in 2024 against Harris. And then lastly, the state of South Carolina. No, actually not lastly. No, hold on. I'm forgetting a few states. I think South Carolina would be likely, but I also forgot to give Harris the second district in Nebraska by a likely margin. Joe Biden won it by 7. I think that she'd win it by probably a similar margin, maybe a little less. Now, going over to actually, there are still 2 likely DeSantis states. I think you know what they are. They're Iowa and the state of Ohio. Now, these 2 states, I think that you know we should really and I'm actually gonna remind myself later. I'm probably gonna send a text to myself because that's the only way I remember things. Uh, I need to make a video talking about Iowa and Ohio because on one hand they're not trending red because I think that Trump 2020 was such a stellar candidate, and especially Trump 2016, he was an amazing candidate for these areas. He appealed to the white working class, to the rural white voters. He really connected with them, and they turned out for him, and they delivered these states to him twice. Now, they're also not trending blue because Democrats, for the most Democrats have lost their appeal to these voters because, they've either gone super corporatist or they've either gone too far to left for these voters' liking. So I think Harris is more corporate than far left, or I guess I shouldn't say far left because that would appear biased, but I think I should say these voters, when Democrats, become very left-wing in their eyes, it turns them off. So I think Harris, in their eyes, is kind of a corporatist, and, I see this a lot. People call Harris a corporatist. Whether that's true or not isn't really, no one cares because, really what matters is how these voters in these states view her, and they don't view her very favorably. So I think that DeSantis could kind of do similar with Trump. I think Harris could improve in the suburbs, because on one hand the suburbs are trending to the left, but on the other hand, DeSantis is a better candidate for the suburbs than Trump. So we don't really know. But I think that, in these states, Harris just wouldn't do enough. She probably wouldn't campaign there even. She wouldn't really care. So she'd still lose them by kind of 2020. As Kamala, can she lose them, by 6 or 7 or 8 points. So going on to these are the states that are going to be really competitive. Now going over to our lean Harris states, I think that, this is a kind of a weird prediction, but, I think that New Hampshire goes to Harris by a lean margin. It was a likely Biden state, and I did actually underestimate Biden by, I think, 4 points in New Hampshire 2020. But I just think that Harris, for these, because New Hampshire is one of the few states that's very white, but also very Democratic. Democrats usually get most that the support that they enjoy comes from minorities. And New Hampshire, I think that, Harris just would not do well enough with the white vote to win New Hampshire by a Biden-type margin. So for that reason, I think it's going to be lean, but not really too super competitive, just a state that falls below the likely margin, which is 5%, 4 to 5 point Harris state. And then I think that Nevada would go for Kamala Harris. This is a state that has been kind of inelastic over the past couple of years. The Democrats have been winning here, but by pretty thin margins, 2 to 5 points. Their best showing, I think, was in the 2018 Senate race where they won it by 5 or 6. But, Biden only won it by 2.2, and Catherine Cortez Masto in 2016 won it by a similar margin. Actually, I think Biden and Clinton, Cortez Masto all won it by like 2.5%. So this is a state that's, again, very inelastic. So I think Nevada, lean D for right now. Now going over to another lean D state, I think that at this point Michigan would be a lean D state. Now I think I originally had this as a DeSantis state in my previous prediction, but I think, the suburbs are just too far gone for the GOP to make them revert. Really, I just think that Harris would probably carry the state as a result of doing better in the suburbs. And, DeSantis might, he could get the rural / white working class strength that Trump got. We don't know yet, but I just think it's that he has to, Trump lost Michigan by nearly 4 points. I just think that DeSantis, could just doesn't do enough to offset Trump's losses in the suburbs there. So maybe it narrows up. Maybe it's only a 2-point Harris state, but it's still a Harris state at the end of the day. For the lean DeSantis states, I think that we have Texas, and Texas is a big state, obviously, but I think that DeSantis does worse than Trump in the Rio Grande Valley because incumbents and incumbent parties usually do better with Hispanics the second time around than the first time around. Plus, I think Harris is just a better candidate for Hispanics than Trump. So I think, this is a state that is going to narrow up, especially in the suburbs in the Rio Grande Valley, but it's just not, Harris just can't do enough to flip it at 2024. It would take a really strong candidate for the Democrats to win in 2024. 2028 is a different story, but as of right now, Texas, I think, should be lean Republican. And then, obviously, Ron DeSantis' home state of Florida. I think we also this coming that this will be a lean Republican state. And, again, DeSantis is pretty popular in Florida. He's still I think he'll win re-election by 5, and I think he'll win if this is the matchup. I think he'd win Florida by 3 or 4. So I think he'd perform a little worse than he would in my prediction for the 2022 gubernatorial election, but still pretty solid showing in Florida. I think that he might do a little worse than Trump with Hispanics, but I think he could do better in the suburbs, in Pinellas County and Duval County, even to a certain extent, St. Lucie and Seminole counties as well. And even maybe Jefferson County, I'm not sure. But, I think Florida, lean Republican state, it was a lean Republican state in 2020, and with their governor on the ballot, there's no reason to think it would flip blue, especially against Kamala Harris. Now, I think that I'm going to give this. Oh, yeah, also I forgot this. That's bordering unlikely, just for the record. Closer to likely than toss up. So, these are the states that are really close that really could go either way. So, first, I think that I'm going to give Georgia to Kamala Harris. I think I originally had it going to DeSantis, but honestly, I think that Kamala would win Georgia in this scenario by a little bit. The voting rights law signed with the GOP doesn't help the Democrats' case here, but I think people are overreacting to it, and I don't think that it's going to have as big of an effect as people think. But Georgia, I think. The suburbs are just, Gwinnett County, Henry County, Newton County, Cobb County. These counties are just too far gone for the GOP, and they make up such big shares of the electorate, and they're growing. They're getting more diverse. That Georgia, I just think, is a lost cause for the GOP at this point. 2022 might be their last stand. If they can flip that Senate seat back red, maybe. But Georgia's looking pretty bleak for the Republican Party. Now, I think that DeSantis is going to actually win the rest of these states. So DeSantis does win in this matchup, and I'll give my reasoning for each of these states. I think that, Pennsylvania, I could see easily going for Kamala. I could see her easily taking Pennsylvania, but I think I'll just give it to DeSantis. It's really close. Again, really close. Either of these could go either way. But starting with Arizona, I just think that the suburban voters who are more, more Republican and more conservative suburban voters in outside of Phoenix, Scottsdale, Glendale, Carefree, that kind of area outside of Phoenix. These voters, I think, are more elastic than most suburban voters. I think that the GOP could actually have a better time with them than other suburban voters because of how conservative they are. I think they went against Trump in 2020 because of his comments regarding John McCain. So I think for that reason, assuming DeSantis doesn't, kind of have a slip up with McCain, which I don't think he will. That's very unlikely. Manage to annoy Arizonan voters at a personal level. I think Arizona would narrowly go back to the Republican Party. Then in Wisconsin, I think that Wisconsin could go either way. But I just think the suburbs of Madison, Milwaukee are just too small for Harris to offset the losses she'd probably experience with the working class and rural voters. So I think Wisconsin is probably the most solid DeSantis state out of these four. So I think Wisconsin, 1.5, 2-point DeSantis victory here. North Carolina, I'll go to. I think this is another state that could go either way, but I just don't see Harris doing well enough in the suburbs and with the black vote. I think she actually could do worse than Biden with the black vote. And in Biden in North Carolina, fun fact, he only got around 80% of the black vote. He actually didn't do amazing with the black vote in North Carolina. So I think, I don't think Harris does well enough with the black vote to flip it to the Democratic Party. So DeSantis narrowly holds North Carolina, and then lastly Pennsylvania. Again, the suburbs of Philadelphia are getting really blue, which is helping the Democrats in Pennsylvania. I think long-term the Democrats in Pennsylvania have it pretty good. But, short-term, these states, I think, are going to revert to a little more Republican in 2024. So I think DeSantis narrowly takes Pennsylvania, and with that, he takes the presidency. So Ron DeSantis, 277 electoral votes. Kamala Harris, 261. I think that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, again, maybe you disagree, comment down below. I'll do my best to reply to productive comments. Like, if you're going to say, attack me personally, great. But if you'd like to actually have a conversation about one of these competitive states, we can do so in the comments. But I think that's it. Thank you for watching. See you all next one. Goodbye.